Welcome to Justice Insight Cam, your source for authentic bodycam footage of police interactions. We do not just show the tape, we break down the law, the facts, and the crucial takeaways of every single encounter. Let us review the evidence.
Probability of paternity, 0%.
Zero? Breathe. Stay with me.
The envelope was so ordinary it almost felt insulting. No warning label, no dramatic stamp, no sirens. Just a plain white packet slid across a polished conference table by a lab courier, who had no idea what was inside, or what it would do. Daniel Hart stared at it like it might move. Across from him, his attorney, Marisol Chen, didn't touch the envelope. She didn't need to. She'd seen this moment before. The moment when a person realizes the ground under their life has been switched with something thinner. Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another text from his wife. "Where are you? You're scaring me." He didn't answer, because the truth was, he wasn't trying to scare her. He was trying to stay upright. Marisol's voice was calm, careful. "Yeah, you don't have to open it right now." Daniel's hands were steady in the way hands get right before they shake. "I do." He broke the seal. Paper slid out. A page full of percentages and clinical language, and a single sentence that looked too neat for what it meant. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. Daniel read it once, then again. Then he lowered the page and for a second, he just stared. Not at Marisol, not at the table, at nothing. 12 years. A wedding ring he hadn't taken off since the day Lauren slid it on. 2 kids who thought their family was normal, and a best friend who'd been at every barbecue, every birthday party, every "we should do this more often" dinner that Daniel had worked overtime to make happen. Marisol watched him closely. "Daniel," she said, "tell me what you're thinking." He swallowed, and his voice came out smaller than he expected. "I'm thinking..." He looked down at the paper again. "I'm thinking I'm about to become the villain in my own house, and I didn't do anything." Marisol nodded. "You're not the villain." Daniel let out a breath that sounded like a laugh, but wasn't. Not yet, because he already understood the next part. Truth doesn't enter a family like a guest. Truth enters like a storm, and in the next 24 hours, Daniel would learn something else. In court, feelings don't freeze bank accounts. Evidence does. And once he started pulling on the thread, everything unraveled faster than anyone could stop it. This is the story of how a DNA test shattered a 12-year marriage, and how the man Lauren trusted most, Daniel's best friend, turned out to be the real father. And it's also the story of how a judge, with one signature, can pause someone's financial life like hitting a mute button. Because when betrayal is personal, people think it stays private. But when money starts moving, it becomes a legal emergency. And that's when the courtroom doors swing open. If you're watching right now, drop a quick comment and tell me where you're watching from. City, state, country. Because stories like this happen everywhere, and the details change, but the feeling doesn't. And if you care about real accountability, what happens when lies meet proof, hit like and subscribe. Not because it fixes anything, but because these stories only stay visible when people keep looking. To understand how a single page could do this much damage, you have to go back to the version of Daniel and Lauren that still believed they were a team. They met in their late 20s. Daniel was the kind of man who carried responsibility like it was a backpack he never took off. He worked in logistics, schedules, routes, deadlines, the type of job where you're always solving problems you didn't create. Lauren worked in marketing, bright, quick, the kind of person who could walk into a room of strangers and leave with friends. They balanced each other. Daniel brought stability, Lauren brought momentum. At least that was the story. They married after 2 years. They bought a modest house in a neighborhood that looked like the inside of a greeting card. Trees, sidewalks, the distant hum of lawn mowers on weekends. A place where you wave at neighbors and pretend everyone is fine. And then the kids came. First, a son, Ethan. Then, 3 years later, a daughter, Sophie. Daniel loved being a father in the way quiet men do. He didn't perform it, he did it. Homework at the kitchen table, soccer practice, band-aids on scraped knees. He was the dad who could get a baby to sleep at 2 a.m. without complaining. Lauren loved motherhood too, especially the parts you could photograph, the matching pajamas, the holiday cards, the perfectly angled birthday cakes. But there were cracks, small ones at first. Lauren started going out more. Not girls' night once a month, more like work event on Thursday, networking dinner on Saturday, happy hour on Tuesday. Daniel didn't push. He told himself she deserved a life outside the house. He told himself he was being modern. He told himself trust meant not asking too many questions. And then there was Mike Reynolds. Mike was Daniel's best friend from college. They'd been roommates, the kind of friendship that survives bad apartments and unpaid bills and dumb decisions. Mike was charming in a way that made people forgive him for being unreliable. He always had a story, always had a reason, always had that grin that said, I know I'm a mess, but I'm lovable. When Daniel married Lauren, Mike stood beside him at the altar. When Ethan was born, Mike showed up at the hospital with a stuffed animal and tears in his eyes like he was part of the family. And that's the thing, he was, just not in the way Daniel thought. The suspicion didn't start with DNA, it started with time. Daniel began noticing patterns that were too clean to be accidents. Lauren would get a work call and step outside, and she'd stay out there long enough that the air would shift colder. Her phone would light up, and she'd tilt it away. She'd smile at a message, then wipe the expression off her face like it never happened. Daniel told himself he was overthinking. Then Sophie turned 8, and Daniel started hearing comments that landed wrong. At a birthday party, Mike ruffled Sophie's hair and said, "That's my girl." It sounded like a joke. Everyone laughed, but Daniel didn't. Later, when Daniel was grilling burgers, Mike stood beside him and said, "Man, you hit the jackpot with Lauren." Daniel smiled politely. Mike added, softer, "She's something else." It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it, like he was remembering her in a way friends shouldn't. Daniel let it go, because confronting your best friend is like pulling a pin you're not sure will explode. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Wednesday. Daniel got home late, tired, already mentally listing tomorrow's problems. The house was quiet, kids asleep, lights dim, Lauren's car in the driveway. But Lauren wasn't inside. He checked his phone. One text, running to the store. Back soon. It had been sent 2 hours earlier. He called, straight to voicemail. He called again, voicemail. Then his phone buzzed, a notification from the family tablet, an iCloud photo upload, a blurry image taken from a moving car at night, streetlights streaking, and in the passenger seat, a familiar hand resting on a familiar thigh. Daniel's stomach dropped because he recognized the watch. Mike's watch. Daniel didn't scream. He didn't punch a wall. He sat down on the couch and stared at the photo until his eyes stopped focusing. When Lauren finally came home, she smelled like perfume that wasn't hers. She walked in like nothing was wrong. Daniel held up the tablet. Lauren's face changed. Not confusion, not offense, recognition. She tried to recover fast. "What is that?" Daniel's voice was quiet. "You tell me." Lauren laughed too quickly. "It's nothing. It's a weird angle." Daniel leaned forward. "That's Mike's watch." Lauren froze, and that freeze, those 2 seconds where she couldn't find the next lie, that was the real confession. Daniel stood up. How long? Lauren's eyes flashed with anger like he was the one crossing a line. Daniel, don't do this. How long? She looked away, and then she said it, not with remorse, with irritation. Iwa, why are you making this so dramatic? That's when Daniel realized he wasn't just dealing with cheating. He was dealing with someone who'd practiced minimizing reality. He slept in the guest room that night, not because he wanted distance, because he didn't trust himself to stay calm. In the morning, Lauren acted like it hadn't happened. Coffee, kids' lunches, normal voice, normal smile. Daniel watched her like she was a stranger wearing his wife's face, and that's when his mind went somewhere he didn't want it to go. Sophie, her smile, her eyes, her dimple, the things he'd always seen as echoes of himself. Suddenly, they felt like questions, and questions become poison if you don't answer them. Daniel didn't go to Mike, not yet. He went to evidence, because when your life starts falling apart, Mark, you have two options. You can argue, or you can document. Marisol Chen wasn't just a divorce attorney. She was the kind of attorney who understood that modern marriages don't break only in bedrooms. They break in data, in timestamps, in GPS trails, in deleted messages that still leave shadows. Daniel sat in her office 2 days after the photo. Marisol listened without interruption. Then she asked one question. What are you afraid she'll do next? Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Marisol leaned back. When people get caught, they do one of two things. They try to fix it, or they try to protect themselves. Daniel's throat tightened. Protect? How? Marisol didn't sugarcoat it. Money, assets, accounts, debt. They move things. They hide things. They spend aggressively. They rewrite the financial story, so by the time you get to court, you're chasing smoke. Daniel stared at the table, because the thought hadn't occurred to him. He'd been focused on his heart. Marisol was focused on his future. She slid a legal pad toward him. Tell me what accounts you share. What's in your name? What's in hers? Daniel listed them. Checking, savings, a joint brokerage account, Lauren's side business account, retirement funds, a home equity line, and one detail that made Marisol's pen pause. Lauren had a separate account Daniel didn't have access to. He'd known it existed. He'd assumed it was harmless. Marisol's eyes lifted. How long has that been open? Daniel thought. Years. She said it was for taxes and freelance stuff. Marisol nodded slowly. Okay, we're going to move quickly. Daniel blinked. Oh, how quickly? Marisol's voice was steady. If we have reason to believe she's dissipating, wasting or moving marital assets, we can ask the court for temporary orders that restrain both parties from transferring funds outside normal living expenses. Daniel's jaw tightened. So the court can freeze things? In some cases, Marisol said, yes, at least enough to stop a financial hit and run, but you need proof, not vibes, proof. Daniel stared at his phone. He didn't want his marriage to become a case file, but he also didn't want to be the man who trusted someone while they emptied the house. Marisol added, and Daniel, if you suspect paternity is in question, we address that carefully. We don't accuse without evidence. We confirm. Daniel's voice came out rough. A DNA test. Marisol didn't flinch. Or a DNA test. The hardest part wasn't the test. It was deciding to do it. Daniel bought an at-home kit first. He held it in his hands in the parking lot like it was contraband. He could have turned the car around. He could have thrown it away. He could have decided ignorance was kinder. But then he pictured Sophie at 18, looking at him with a question he couldn't answer. So he didn't throw it away. He took it home. He waited until the kids were distracted. He told Sophie he needed her to swab her cheek for a science project. She giggled. Are we making slime? Daniel smiled like his face hadn't forgotten how. Not slime, he said. Just a test. She swabbed her cheek without suspicion. Daniel did his, and when he sealed the package, his hands finally started to shake. Because now there was a clock counting down to whatever truth had been sitting in his house for 8 years. While the lab processed the sample, Daniel did something else. He watched, not with paranoia, with clarity. He checked the joint accounts daily. He downloaded statements. He created a secure folder. He changed passwords. And then, 3 nights later, Lauren did exactly what Marisol warned. Daniel woke up at 2:13 a.m. to the sound of the printer. Soft mechanical hum, paper sliding. He walked down the hall. Quietly. The office door was cracked. Lauren was inside, lit by the cold glow of her laptop. She didn't hear him. On the desk, bank forms, wire transfer instructions, a stack of papers with their joint brokerage account number printed in bold. Daniel's stomach turned. Because you don't print transfer forms at 2 in the morning if you're planning to surprise your spouse. He stepped into the doorway. Lauren jolted. Daniel! Her hand flew to the papers like she could hide them under her palm. Daniel kept his voice flat. What are you doing? Lauren's eyes hardened. None of your business. Daniel took 1 step forward. It's our account. Lauren stood up. I'm protecting myself. I'm not going to be left with nothing because you're having a midlife crisis. Daniel stared at her. Midlife crisis. As if he'd imagined the photo. As if he'd imagined her silence. As if reality was something she could label and dismiss. He reached for the top page. Lauren slapped his hand away. Don't, she hissed. Daniel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He said, if you move that money, I will file tomorrow, and the court will see exactly what you tried to do. Lauren's face twisted. You think a judge cares about your feelings? Daniel looked at the papers again, and then he said something that startled even him. It's not about my feelings. It's about fraud. Lauren froze, and in that freeze, Daniel saw fear. Not fear of losing him, fear of losing control. The lab email arrived the following afternoon. Daniel sat in his car outside Marisol's office with the phone in his hand. He didn't open it for a full minute. Because once you know, you can't unknow. Finally, he tapped, and there it was, 0.00%. Daniel walked into Marisol's office with the result printed out, his face pale, his movements precise. Marisol read it once, then she set it down, and her voice softened, not in pity, but in recognition. I'm sorry, she said. Daniel looked past her. I feel like I'm watching someone else's life. Marisol nodded. Okay, we act, but we act smart. Daniel swallowed. What do I do about Sophie? Marisol was careful. You keep being her dad. Biology and fatherhood are not the same thing. The court will treat paternity as a legal issue. Your heart will treat it as something else, but you don't make her pay for the adult choices that created this. Daniel blinked fast. He hadn't cried yet, not because he didn't feel it, because his body was still trying to understand. Marisol turned the page over and began writing. Step 1, she said. We file for divorce and request temporary orders. Step 2, we move for a financial restraining order. Step 3, we secure evidence of the affair. Daniel stared. Ornum, the DNA isn't enough. It's enough to raise paternity issues, Marisol said. But for asset restraint, the court will look at behavior, risk. You already saw her printing transfer forms at 2 a.m. That's not normal. That's urgency. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mike. Marisol's eyes met his. Mike is part of the story, but we don't confront him first. We document, we file, then we confront. Daniel leaned back and his voice came out low. I want to hear her say it. Marisol didn't stop him. You will, but not on your timeline, on a timeline that keeps you protected. Here's the part most people don't realize. Divorce isn't one moment. It's a sequence of legal moves, and the first moves matter because they decide what kind of battlefield you're standing on. Marisol filed the petition the next morning. She also filed an emergency motion requesting temporary financial restraints, an order preventing either spouse from transferring, hiding, or disposing of marital assets outside ordinary expenses. In plain language, don't drain the accounts, don't sell the investments, don't move money into a friend's name, and if you try, the court will treat it like contempt. Daniel signed paperwork with hands that didn't feel like his. He kept thinking about how normal this would look to a stranger. A man in a hallway with a folder. A man signing documents. A man doing what thousands of people do every day. But for Daniel, it felt like stepping into a different life without consent. That afternoon, Lauren was served. Not at home, at her office, in front of co-workers. Because the system doesn't care about dignity. It cares about notice. Lauren called him within 10 minutes. Her voice was sharp, vibrating with rage. "You did this to humiliate me." Daniel sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. "I did this because you were trying to move money." "I was protecting myself." Daniel's voice stayed quiet. "From what? Consequences?" Lauren laughed, short, angry. "You're insane. You're obsessed. You're trying to control me." Daniel closed his eyes. This is the part that makes people doubt themselves, when the person who betrayed you acts like you're the problem for noticing. Daniel opened his eyes and said, "The DNA test says I'm not Sophie's father." Silence, not confusion, not outrage, silence. The kind of silence that answers a question without words. Lauren's breath caught, then she whispered, "How dare you?" Daniel's throat tightened. "How dare I?" Lauren's voice rose. "You tested her behind my back." Daniel cut in. "You let me raise her for 8 years without telling me the truth." Lauren's voice cracked, and for the first time, something like fear slipped through. "She's your daughter," she said. Daniel stared out the windshield. "She's my daughter because I've been her dad, but I needed the truth." Lauren's voice dropped. "It was one mistake." Daniel swallowed. "With Mike?" Lauren didn't answer. Daniel's hands trembled. "Was it Mike?" And then she said it. "Yes." Just one word. 12 years of marriage reduced to one word. Daniel's voice went thin. "How long?" Lauren exhaled shakily. It happened years ago. It's done. It meant nothing." Daniel laughed, and this time it sounded real. "Nothing?" he said. "Sophie is 8. Lauren's voice sharpened again, trying to get control back. "Don't you dare take her from me." Daniel's eyes stung. "I'm not taking her. I'm trying to keep her safe while you burn everything down." Lauren's voice turned cold. "If you bring Mike into this, I will destroy you." Daniel went still, and if you've ever had someone threaten you after they wronged you, you know exactly what Daniel felt in that moment. Not fear, not anger, a kind of clarity that makes you dangerous. He said, "Try." Then he hung up. Do you think Daniel was wrong for doing the DNA test without telling Lauren first? Or do you think the truth, when someone's been lying for years, justifies the method? Drop your take in the comments because people argue about this like it's hypothetical until it happens to them. Court moved fast. Not because the system was compassionate, because the system understands one thing very well: risk. Marisol had documented the late-night transfer paperwork. She had the account numbers. She had screenshots of the printer log. She had bank alerts showing unusual attempted movements. And she had Daniel's sworn statement describing what he saw. When you walk into court with that kind of detail, you're not asking a judge to believe your heartbreak. You're asking a judge to prevent a measurable harm. In the hearing, Lauren showed up with her own attorney, a man who wore confidence like a suit. He argued that Lauren was simply organizing finances and that Daniel was acting out of emotion. Marisol didn't argue emotions. She argued patterns. She said, "Your Honor, The respondent printed wire transfer forms at 2:13 a.m. She attempted to move funds in a joint account within days of confronting evidence of marital misconduct. The petitioner seeks a temporary order restraining both parties from transferring, disposing, or encumbering marital assets outside ordinary living expenses, pending further proceedings. The judge looked down at the documents, then up at Lauren. "Ms. Hart," the judge said, "did you attempt to transfer funds from joint accounts after learning divorce was likely?" Lauren's face tightened. "I was protecting my children." The judge's expression didn't change. "That's not an answer." Lauren's attorney stepped in. "Your Honor, my client denies any intent to hide assets." Marisol slid another page forward, a bank notice, an attempted transfer, a timestamp. The judge's eyes moved across the paper. Then he set it down. Ace picked up his pen and said, "Temporary mutual restraining orders are granted. Neither party is to transfer, sell, or conceal marital assets except for ordinary living expenses. Any violation will be met with contempt." Daniel felt something in his chest loosen. Not relief, not victory, stability. For the first time since the photo, something had stopped moving, and within 24 hours of filing, the legal wall went up. The court didn't freeze Lauren as a person, but it froze her ability to rewrite the financial story in the dark. Outside the courtroom, Lauren glared at Daniel like he'd betrayed her. Daniel didn't flinch, because he finally understood the shape of her loyalty. It existed only when it protected her. Now came the part Daniel had been dreading. Mike. Daniel didn't want a fight. He wanted an explanation. But explanations don't undo years. They just add detail to the wound. Mike answered Daniel's call on the second ring, cheerful. "Danny, what's up?" Daniel's voice was flat. "I need to see you." Mike hesitated. Sure. Everything okay?" Daniel said, "No." They met at a quiet coffee shop, the kind of place where people whisper into laptops and pretend they're too busy to notice other people's pain. Mike walked in smiling, until he saw Daniel's face. Then the smile slipped. Daniel didn't sit down. He placed the DNA results on the table. Mike stared, his eyes scanned the page, and his mouth opened, then closed. Daniel watched him, and his voice came out low. "Say something." Mike swallowed hard. "Daniel, Daniel leaned in. "How long?" Mike's eyes flicked around the shop, like he wanted an exit. Daniel didn't give him one. Mike's voice was quiet. "It was years ago." Daniel nodded slowly. "And you let me raise her." Mike's eyes filled with something that looked like guilt. "I didn't know she was mine." Daniel's laugh was sharp. "You didn't know?" Mike lowered his voice. "Lauren told me it was over. She said you two were fine. She said..." Daniel cut him off. "So you believed her, and you stayed in my house." Mike flinched. Daniel's throat burned. "You held my daughter. You came to her birthdays. You let her call me Dad while you sat there knowing what you'd done." Mike's voice cracked. "I'm sorry." Daniel stared at him, and that's the cruelest part of betrayal. The apology doesn't match the damage. "I'm sorry" is a cup of water on a house fire. Daniel's hands clenched. "Why?" Mike whispered. Because I'm weak." Daniel blinked. He'd expected excuses. He hadn't expected honesty, but honesty didn't help. It just made Mike look smaller. Daniel took the paper back. "You're not coming near my kids." Mike's head snapped up. "Daniel!" Daniel's voice went cold. "Don't! You don't get to negotiate boundaries you helped destroy." He turned and walked out, and as the bell above the door chimed behind him, Daniel realized something. He wasn't angry because Mike had slept with his wife. He was angry because Mike had stolen something deeper, trust in his own perception, the sense that his friendships were safe, the belief that the people around his kids were chosen carefully, and now every memory felt contaminated. The divorce process didn't become easier after the truth. It became clearer. Lauren's strategy shifted. When denial failed, she went to rewriting. She told friends Daniel was controlling. She told her family he was unstable. She framed the DNA test as betrayal, as if proving truth was a worse sin than hiding it. And in court filings, she tried to paint Daniel as vindictive. Marisol anticipated that. She prepared. She documented Daniel's involvement as a father, school emails, medical forms, photos, schedules. She made it clear Daniel wasn't trying to erase Sophie. He was trying to protect her, because here's what courts care about in the middle of adult chaos: the children, not as props, as human beings. During a custody conference, a counselor asked Daniel a simple question. Do you still want to be Sophie's legal father? Daniel's eyes stung. He could have said, I don't know. He could have said, Adot, I'm hurt. He could have said, I need time. Instead, he said the truth. Yes, and he meant it, because Sophie didn't ask to be born into a lie, and Daniel refused to make her pay for it. That decision, staying, wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was choosing fatherhood as an action, not a genetic fact. Lauren tried to use Sophie as leverage. At one point she said, in a message Marisol later submitted, if you keep pushing this, I'll tell Sophie you're not her real dad. That message landed like a brick, because it revealed Lauren's mindset. The truth was never about Sophie, it was about control. When the judge saw it, his patience thinned. Children are not weapons, he said in open court. Lauren's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Daniel sat still, eager staring at the judge's bench like it was the only stable thing in the room. The financial restraints held. The joint account stayed intact. The brokerage account was monitored. Lauren couldn't drain it. She couldn't sell without disclosure. She couldn't move money into Mike's name without consequences. And when the divorce moved towards settlement, the numbers became less important than the truth behind them. Marisol pushed for a fair split, child support calculations, and a clear parenting plan. Lauren pushed for control. In mediation, she said, "He's humiliating me." Daniel's voice stayed quiet. "You humiliated me." Lauren glared. "I made a mistake." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time in months, his voice wasn't shaking. "A mistake is forgetting a birthday," he said. "A mistake is taking the wrong exit." This was a choice, a lie you renewed every day. The mediator, a tired woman with kind eyes, watched them for a long moment. Then she said softly, "Let's bring this back to the children. And that's the hardest part. You can be shattered, but you still have to show up for homework. You still have to pack lunches. You still have to clap at school performances. Pain doesn't pause parenting." Daniel learned to live inside that contradiction. He learned to cry in the shower so the kids wouldn't hear. He learned to breathe through the moments when Sophie ran to him screaming, "Daddy!" Because every time she said it, it was both a wound and a reminder. He was still her safe place. By the time the final settlement was signed, the story had shifted. Not because everyone healed, because the facts were now permanent. Lauren had to accept that the court would not reward secrecy. Mike had to accept that his role in their lives was over. And Daniel had to accept that the man he used to be, the man who trusted easily, was gone. The judge finalized orders, division of property, parenting plan, support terms, and the temporary financial restraints were replaced by permanent rules and accountability. When it ended, there was no music, no applause, just paper, and a man walking out of a courthouse into a sunlight that felt too bright. Daniel sat in his car afterward and didn't turn the engine on for a long time, because endings don't always feel like closure. Sometimes they feel like exhaustion. So what does this story actually show? It shows that betrayal isn't just an affair. It's the way people rewrite reality to avoid consequences. It's the way someone can stand in your home, laugh at your jokes, hold your child, while hiding a truth that would destroy you. It shows that in modern life, truth often arrives through data, through timestamps, records, and a clinical DNA percentage that doesn't care how much you loved. And it shows something else. When someone's willing to lie that long, the first thing they often do when they're caught is reach for money, because money is control, and control is what they were protecting all along. Daniel didn't win a prize. He didn't get his old life back. He got something quieter, a boundary, a legal line that said, you don't get to burn the house down and keep the furniture. And he got a decision, a difficult one, to keep being Sophie's dad. Not because of DNA, because of love, because of years, because of presence. Here's the final question. If you were Daniel, would you have confronted Lauren first? Or would you have done what he did? Gather proof, move fast, and let the court put a lock on the damage before it spread? Let me know below, because one day, somewhere, someone is going to open an ordinary envelope and realize their entire life has been living in the space between a lie and a percentage.
We thank you for watching. If this episode provided clarity on the matter, kindly like, share, and subscribe to the Justice Insight Cam channel. Stay educated, stay secure, and we look forward to our next review.